There comes a moment in every human life when the stillness of the soul is tested. A word cuts deep, a gesture provokes, or a circumstance pushes us to the edge of our patience. Confrontation is inevitable. It is woven into the fabric of human interaction. Yet the question is not whether we will face conflict. It is how we will stand in the midst of it. Do we allow the storm of another's anger to sweep us away, or do we remain anchored in calm, rooted in an inner strength that no outside force can destroy? True calmness in confrontation is not weakness. It is the highest form of strength, for it shows mastery not over the other, but over oneself. Let us journey into 5 truths that will allow you to remain composed in any confrontation, no matter how intense the fire may burn. When life confronts us with hostility, provocation, or sudden storms of anger, the natural impulse of the human psyche is to react. It rises from deep within, an ancient inheritance from our ancestors, for whom survival depended on rapid response. To be insulted, threatened, or opposed ignites the old fire of fight or flight. Yet to live fully in the present, we cannot remain enslaved to these primitive impulses. Reaction is quick, but it is blind. It is the untrained mind seizing the reins of the moment, steering us into chaos. What separates one who is master of themselves from one who is captive to their instincts is the ability to pause, to insert a breath, to create space where there would otherwise be none. This pause is not a weakness. It is the deepest expression of strength, for in the pause, the raw energy of instinct is transmuted into awareness. It is in that single breath that we choose whether to mirror the chaos in front of us or to stand apart from it. Neuroscience confirms what the ancients intuited. A slow breath quells the surge of the amygdala, the brain's alarm bell, and restores balance to the rational mind. What appears to be a moment of stillness is in truth a moment of transformation, a crossing from compulsion to choice. Imagine yourself in a heated argument, perhaps with a friend, a partner, or even a stranger. Words are exchanged with the sharpness of knives. Every syllable cuts deeper. Your body tightens, your heart races, and your mind urges you to strike back. At that instant, the pause is your salvation. To draw in a breath, to let silence hold for a second longer than your impulses allow, is to reclaim sovereignty over yourself. That brief stillness interrupts the cycle of escalation. It allows you to hear not only the other's words, but also the echo of your own thoughts, to feel not only the sting of their provocation, but also the depth of your own being. Think of the soldier, trained not merely to fight, but to hold position while chaos erupts around him. His stillness is not hesitation. It is discipline carved into the marrow of his being. In the same way, when you practice the art of pausing, you are not avoiding the confrontation, nor are you surrendering to it. You are choosing the higher ground, establishing yourself as master of the situation by first being master of yourself. The world may see your silence as passivity, but within you it is the gathering of power. There is a story of a woman who worked in an office where tempers often flared. One day, her supervisor, overwhelmed by stress, lashed out at her unjustly in front of others. The old self within her longed to retaliate, to defend her dignity with equal fire. But instead she paused. She looked at him, took a breath, and remained silent. In that breath she saw not only her own rising anger, but also the exhaustion and fear beneath his. Later, when the storm had passed, he came to her privately and apologized. Had she reacted, the conflict would have hardened into resentment. Because she paused, space was created for reconciliation. The pause also reveals hidden truths. It allows us to see that behind every confrontation lies more than words or gestures. Often the fury directed at us is not about us at all. It is the projection of another's inner struggle, the spilling of their unseen wounds. Without a pause, we absorb that chaos as if it were our own. With a pause, we recognize it for what it is, a mirror reflecting their turmoil, not our essence. In mythology, the hero does not triumph by swinging the sword at every shadow. He succeeds by knowing when to step back, when to observe, when to wait for the right moment to act. Likewise, in life, the pause gives us clarity to discern whether the battle before us is worth fighting, or whether it is but a shadow meant to test our patience. To pause is to step out of the unconscious current and to choose a conscious path. Consider also the wisdom of nature. The river that rushes too quickly crashes into rocks and stirs up mud, but the river that slows allows its waters to clear and flow steadily to the sea. The pause is that slowing down. It clears the turbulence of thought and emotion, allowing clarity to emerge. The person who has mastered the pause is like that steady river, calm yet powerful, capable of moving mountains not by violence but by persistence. There is no denying that pausing in the heat of confrontation is difficult. It feels unnatural, even unbearable. Silence in the face of accusation or insult can feel like surrender. Yet this is the illusion of the ego, which seeks constant defense. The deeper self knows that not every attack requires a counterattack, and not every wound requires retaliation. The deeper self knows that in silence, strength matures. It knows that calmness does not mean defeat, it means sovereignty. When you pause, you do not let the other person control your narrative. Instead, you remind yourself that you are not bound by their provocation. You are not their puppet, dancing to the strings of anger or pride. You are free to choose your response, free to act from wisdom rather than compulsion. And this freedom, born in a single breath, transforms not only the confrontation, but also the course of your life. The practice of pausing, like any discipline, grows with repetition. At first it may be a breath, then two, then a moment of silence before speaking. Over time, the pause becomes your second nature, a natural defense against the storms of the world. What once felt like restraint becomes liberation. What once felt like weakness becomes your strongest armor. In the end, the pause is not simply about surviving confrontation. It is about transcending it. It is about turning conflict into a mirror through which we see ourselves more clearly. It is about discovering that the true battle is never between you and another, but between you and your own instincts. To master the pause is to master this inner battle, and when you do, no confrontation, no matter how fierce, can shake the calm that dwells within you. In every confrontation, what inflames the fire is rarely the surface incident, but the hidden wound of the ego. Someone questions our opinion, someone interrupts our speech, someone fails to acknowledge our effort, and suddenly the self within bristles with indignation. It is not the spilled drink, the careless word, or the dismissive gesture that truly unsettles us. It is the story the ego tells about what those moments mean. The ego whispers, "You are not respected, you are not valued, you are diminished," and like dry wood catching flame we burn. Yet if we peel back the layers, what do we find? A spilled drink is only liquid on the table. A word is only a vibration in the air. A gesture is fleeting, gone in an instant. But the ego attaches to these moments, distorts them, and magnifies them until they seem to threaten our very existence. The truth is, they cannot. They are passing storms, not the essence of who we are. When we confront another, the clash is often not between two people, but between two egos, both guarding fragile fortresses built on fear of insignificance. One defends its honor, the other defends its pride, and in the battle of illusions both are wounded. The tragedy is that essence, our true self, the core that cannot be diminished, remains untouched yet unseen. To separate ego from essence is to awaken to this truth: my value does not rise or fall with another's opinion of me. My being is not defined by insult or praise. Like the deep ocean, I am vast and steady. Waves may ripple on the surface, but they cannot shake the depths. Consider two people in a crowded restaurant, one accidentally spilling a glass of water on the other. To one, the event is simply an accident. Unpleasant, yes, but harmless. To the other, the ego interprets it as an attack. How dare you disrespect me? Do you not see who I am? From this distortion, a simple mishap becomes a confrontation, escalating beyond proportion. The same event, two different stories, one guided by essence, the other by ego. This illustrates the profound difference between living from truth and living from illusion. The ego thrives on recognition, control, and validation. It is fragile because it depends on the outside world for its sense of worth. A single word can pierce it, a single glance can wound it. Essence, however, is independent of these external tides. It knows itself without needing to be affirmed. It rests in quiet dignity, unshaken by praise and unbroken by insult. To live from essence in the heat of confrontation is to remember that nothing said or done can alter the truth of who you are. You may be insulted, but you are not insult itself. You may be ignored, but you are not unworthy. You may be challenged, but you are not diminished. Essence is the silent witness that observes the storm, but does not become the storm. This recognition is not easy, for the ego speaks loudly and urgently. It demands defense, it shouts for retaliation, it tells you that your very survival is at stake. But if you listen closely, you will notice its panic, its desperation. Ego is afraid of being seen as nothing, and so it clings to every opportunity to inflate itself. Essence has no such fear. Essence is content in being. It requires no defense because it cannot be harmed. There is a story of a spiritual teacher who was once publicly insulted by a man. The crowd expected him to retaliate to defend his dignity. Instead, he remained calm and asked the man, "If someone offers you a gift and you do not accept it, to whom does the gift belong?" The man answered, "To the one who offered it." The teacher replied, "Then I do not accept your insults, and they remain with you." This is the wisdom of separating ego from essence. When you do not take the insult into yourself, it cannot touch you. Think also of history's great figures who endured ridicule and opposition. Many of them did not waste their energy defending their egos. They anchored themselves in their vision, in the essence of their calling. Mockery could not weaken them because their worth was not bound to approval. They walked calmly through storms that would have consumed others because they knew who they were beneath the noise of the world. When you learn to live from essence, you begin to see confrontation differently. No longer is it a battlefield of egos, but a mirror showing where illusions hold power over you. Every insult becomes an opportunity to ask, why does this wound me? What story is my ego telling? What fear lies beneath this reaction? In this way, confrontation becomes a teacher, guiding you toward deeper self-knowledge. To separate ego from essence is to experience liberation. You no longer need to win every argument or prove yourself in every encounter. You no longer need to correct every slight or demand every recognition. You realize that these pursuits only strengthen the chains of ego. Instead, you rest in the quiet power of knowing that your dignity cannot be taken because it was never given by the world in the first place. Imagine the peace of walking through life with this awareness. Someone shouts at you in anger, but instead of reacting, you see their pain reflected in their words. Someone dismisses your effort, but you know your value is not measured by their acknowledgement. Someone challenges your authority, but you do not need to defend it with aggression, because your true authority lies in the steadiness of your being. This is not indifference, it is not weakness, it is the greatest strength. For when you are no longer enslaved by the ego, you can respond with clarity, compassion, and firmness where needed. You are free to choose your response, not bound to the reflex of defense. You can meet hostility with calmness, insult with silence, and conflict with wisdom. The more you practice separating ego from essence, the more you discover that calmness in confrontation is not about controlling the other, but about mastering yourself. The battle is never truly external. It is always within. And when the ego loses its grip, when the essence shines forth, no storm outside can disturb the stillness inside. Conflict is rarely fueled by the facts of the matter. It is fed by the feeling of not being seen, not being understood, not being valued. When two people clash, it is almost never because the truth is irreconcilable, but because the need for recognition is unmet. In these moments, most people fall into the same trap. Instead of listening, they prepare their counterattack. Their silence is not presence but preparation, not openness but defense. Words are sharpened like knives, ready to be unleashed at the slightest pause in the other's speech. And so the argument escalates, not because of what is being said, but because neither side feels heard. To transform confrontation into peace, one must dare to do the thing that feels most unnatural in the heat of conflict. Listen. Not listen with the intent to correct, not listen with the goal of winning, but listen with the simple aim of understanding. This act is not weakness, it is disarmament. It strips the confrontation of its fuel. When the other feels that their voice is truly received, their anger begins to lose its grip. The weapons they carried so tightly start to fall from their hands. There is a story of a manager who was faced with an employee consumed by rage, furious at being overlooked, convinced that his contributions were ignored. The manager could have defended himself, justified his choices, or silenced the outburst with authority. But instead, he uttered words that changed everything. "Tell me everything you need me to hear." For 15 minutes, the employee poured out his anger, his disappointment, his resentment, and with each sentence, as his emotions found space to exist, the storm began to quiet. By the end, there was no enemy left to fight, only a man relieved that someone had finally listened. This is the alchemy of listening. It takes fire and turns it into ash. It is not that agreement is reached, nor that one side surrenders. It is that the deeper hunger, the hunger to be acknowledged, is satisfied. A person who feels heard no longer needs to shout. A person who feels seen no longer needs to demand recognition through force. Listening creates a mirror. When you listen with true presence, you reflect the other person back to themselves. They hear their own words, they feel their own emotions, and in that reflection they begin to recognize their humanity. The walls of defensiveness soften, and the sharp edges of anger smooth into vulnerability. In this space peace is born. Imagine standing in a heated confrontation, someone's voice rising, their words cutting. Your instinct is to interrupt, to correct, to defend yourself, but instead you stay still and you listen, you nod, you allow silence, you show with your presence that their voice matters. What happens? The fury, which thrives on resistance, suddenly finds no opponent. Like a wave that crashes onto the shore, its energy dissipates into calm. By listening, you become the silence that ends the shouting. Listening requires humility, for it demands that you place your ego aside. To truly hear another, you must suspend the urge to prove yourself right. You must accept that your turn to speak is not always the most urgent need in the room. Humility opens the door to understanding, and understanding opens the door to peace. This is not to say that listening means agreeing with what is said or tolerating what is false. Listening does not mean surrendering your truth. It means giving space for the other's truth to exist long enough to be acknowledged. Often, this is all that is required. When people are heard, they often find their own contradictions, their own inconsistencies. They begin to resolve within themselves what no argument could ever have resolved for them. Think of the countless conflicts in families, workplaces, and communities that are not about the real issue, but about the cry beneath the surface. Do you see me? Do you care about what I feel? When that cry is met with defensiveness, conflict becomes war. When that cry is met with listening, conflict becomes dialogue. The difference is profound, and the choice rests with us. Listening as a weapon of peace also transforms you. It changes the way you hold yourself in the world. Instead of fearing confrontation, you begin to see it as an opportunity to understand more deeply the hidden struggles of others. You become less reactive, less defensive, because you recognize that behind every outburst lies a story of pain, of longing, of fear. To listen is to touch that story without judgment. There was once a wise elder who said, "When people speak in anger, they are not attacking you. They are revealing their wounds." To listen in these moments is to look past the mask of hostility and into the heart that is crying out. What greater gift can you offer than to hold space for that cry, not with pity, but with presence? In practicing this, you may notice a transformation not only in others, but within yourself. By listening, you begin to hear more than words. You hear emotions, you hear fears, you hear the echoes of unspoken desires. You cultivate a deeper sensitivity to the human condition. This makes you stronger, not weaker, for you learn to navigate conflict with wisdom rather than brute force. Listening does not guarantee that every conflict will dissolve, but it guarantees that you will not add fuel to the fire. Even if the other remains resistant, your calm presence and genuine attention become a stabilizing force. You will walk away not as a participant in chaos, but as a bearer of peace. This is no small achievement. In a world where voices compete to be louder, the one who listens holds true power. And so, the art of listening becomes more than a tactic. It becomes a way of being. It is the refusal to let noise define you, the courage to meet hostility with patience, and the wisdom to know that peace is born not from winning arguments, but from healing hearts. When you practice this, you carry within you a silent strength. You no longer need to conquer others with words, for your presence itself becomes the resolution. To listen in the midst of confrontation is to hold up a mirror where the other can finally see themselves. In that reflection, anger loses its grip, pride loosens its hold, and the possibility of peace arises. This is why listening, in its purest form, is not passive. It is the most active force for harmony. It disarms without violence, it transforms without force, and it heals without demand. There is a great difference between silence and calmness. One can remain silent while a storm rages inside, the body tense, the heart pounding, the mind crafting retaliations that never escape the lips. This is not calmness, it is suppression. True calmness is not about withholding words, but about reclaiming the power of choice. It is to stand in the fire of provocation and decide with clarity how to move forward. In that moment, you are no longer the prisoner of instinct. You are the author of your own action. Every confrontation presents a crossroad. On one path lies reaction, swift and unexamined, born of wounded pride and unconscious impulse. On the other path lies response, deliberate and intentional, shaped by your values and guided by the deeper vision of who you are. Reaction is automatic, it enslaves. Response is chosen, it liberates. The difference may appear small, but in reality, it is the very boundary between chaos and mastery. When you react, you give your power away. You become a mirror of the other's agitation, an echo of their hostility. They provoke, and you respond in kind, not because you chose to, but because you were pulled like a puppet on invisible strings. Yet when you choose to respond, you cut those strings. You act not from compulsion, but from freedom. The other person may shout, but you will not shout merely because they did. They may belittle you, but you will not demean yourself by meeting insult with insult. In choosing your response, you become sovereign over yourself. This principle is nowhere more evident than in negotiation. The calm negotiator, the one who refuses to be dragged into emotional traps, always carries the advantage. While others become entangled in anger or defensiveness, the calm mind remains clear, able to see not just the surface of the conflict but the larger currents beneath it. They can weigh options, consider outcomes, and decide not only what is expedient but what serves the higher purpose. Their calmness is not passivity, it is strategy. It is the ability to see the entire board while others stare only at the piece before them. Consider a business leader in a tense meeting, accused of being unfair. The reactive leader will defend immediately, perhaps raising their voice, escalating the tension, and losing the respect of those watching. The responsive leader, however, breathes, listens, and then speaks with clarity. I hear your concern. Let us examine the facts together. In that moment, power shifts. The confrontation is transformed from a battlefield into a dialogue, and resolution becomes possible. But choosing to respond is not always about diplomacy or politeness. Sometimes the wisest response is firm, even fierce. At other times, the wisest response is compassionate, softening the hardness of the other. And there are moments still when the wisest response is withdrawal, stepping away not out of fear, but out of clarity that the battle is not worth fighting. The essence of mastery is not in always choosing gentleness, nor in always choosing strength, but in knowing that whatever you choose is truly yours, not the automatic echo of another's provocation. There is freedom in this. Most people live as if their emotions are chains, binding them to predictable patterns of behavior. They are insulted, so they insult back. They are attacked, so they retaliate. They are ignored, so they demand attention. But the one who has learned to respond knows that they do not need to be chained. They can pause, breathe, and decide. They can ask, what serves me here? What serves the truth I live by? What outcome do I desire beyond this moment? In that reflection, they discover the vast space of possibility that lies between stimulus and action. Think of a parent confronted by a child's defiance. The reactive parent shouts, punishes, escalates. The responsive parent pauses and sees beneath the defiance to the frustration or pain driving it. They may still discipline, but it is measured, directed toward growth rather than revenge. The outcome is entirely different, not just for the child, but for the bond between them. Reaction wounds, response heals. History, too, offers us countless examples of those who chose response over reaction. Great leaders did not simply mirror the hostility directed toward them. They chose with deliberation how to meet it, guided by their vision rather than their impulses. Think of the reformers, the revolutionaries of spirit who endured insult, imprisonment, or attack. Had they reacted with the same violence inflicted upon them, their message would have been lost. But because they responded with clarity, restraint, or compassion, their influence grew, and their vision endured. To respond rather than react is also an act of profound self-respect. It says, I will not allow another's chaos to dictate my being. I will not reduce myself to the level of their anger. I will act according to who I am, not according to what they demand. This is dignity in its purest form. It is the refusal to let the storm outside drown the calm within, and yet we must not deceive ourselves into thinking this is easy. The pull of reaction is strong, for it satisfies the ego. To strike back feels good in the moment, but it poisons us in the long run. The discipline of response requires patience, self-awareness, and courage. It requires you to stand in the tension of unspent anger and let it dissolve into clarity before you act. This is a kind of inner alchemy, turning base impulse into the gold of wisdom. Imagine what it would be like to carry this discipline into every confrontation. Someone insults you, and instead of snapping back, you pause and ask yourself, what do I want this exchange to create? Do I want bitterness, or do I want peace? Do I want to win the argument, or do I want to protect my dignity? With that reflection you choose. And your choice creates a reality that reaction never could. This way of being transforms not only how others see you, but how you see yourself. You begin to trust your own strength, because you know it is no longer at the mercy of impulse. You begin to walk with a quiet confidence, because you carry within you the freedom to act with intention, and others, sensing this, respond to you differently. They feel the steadiness in you, the refusal to be baited, the clarity of one who knows themselves. In time, choosing response over reaction becomes more than a tool, it becomes a way of life. You no longer waste energy in pointless battles. You no longer carry regret for words spoken in haste. Instead, you carry a sense of integrity, knowing that even in conflict, you remain true to yourself. And this integrity, this inner coherence, is what gives birth to calmness in its deepest form. It is not the silence of suppression, but the silence of freedom, the stillness of one who acts not from compulsion, but from choice. To live in this way is to realize that confrontation need not be a threat. It can be a stage upon which you practice your mastery, a mirror in which you see your progress, a crucible in which your impulses are transformed into wisdom. When you learn to choose response over reaction, every conflict becomes an opportunity not to lose yourself, but to become more fully who you are. When you step into the heat of confrontation, the temptation is always to be swept into the immediacy of the moment, to defend yourself, to assert dominance, to win. Yet the truth is, no matter how sharp the sting of words or how pressing the urgency of a quarrel may feel, every confrontation is part of something larger. It is but a single thread woven into the fabric of your life, and its true meaning can only be understood when held against the backdrop of your greater vision. If you do not know what you serve, then every insult, every disagreement, every clash of wills will feel like a personal assault. But when you anchor yourself in the larger vision, the noise of conflict loses its power to dictate your course. You begin to see beyond the small battles to the horizon you are walking toward. Think of a craftsman building a cathedral. If he quarrels with another worker over a single stone, forgetting the majesty of the structure he is part of, then the vision collapses into triviality. But if he remembers that every stone, no matter how small, serves the greater whole, then even a dispute about a detail becomes an opportunity to align once more with the higher purpose. The same applies to your life. If you are in conflict with a colleague, the vision might not be to prove who is right or wrong, but to ensure that the project succeeds. The real victory is not in outwitting them, but in building together what could not be built alone. In the sphere of intimate relationships, this truth is even more profound. Many couples destroy years of love over moments of pride because they mistake the confrontation as a battlefield for personal validation, rather than a chance to protect the fragile and sacred bond they share. A sharp word, a raised voice, a misinterpreted silence, these are but sparks. Yet when the greater vision of love, trust, and companionship is forgotten, those sparks ignite a fire that consumes what was most precious. But when you remind yourself that the greater vision is the preservation of connection, the nurturing of intimacy, and the safeguarding of trust, then a momentary storm loses its power to undo you. You can let go of being right in order to protect what is truly important, the continuity of love itself, even in the most fleeting encounters, with strangers, with passers-by, with those you may never see again. The same principle holds. Imagine someone cuts you off in traffic, their gesture rude and reckless. Your ego urges you to retaliate, to prove that you will not be disrespected. Yet, what is the greater vision here? Is it to risk your peace, your safety, and your dignity in order to assert yourself against someone who may not even remember your existence? Or is it to preserve the sanctity of your inner calm, to guard your spirit from being dragged into the chaos of another's unconsciousness? The vision here is simple but profound: to remain the guardian of your own equilibrium, to walk through the world without being enslaved by every storm that passes your way. History offers us luminous examples of those who lived anchored in a vision so vast that no confrontation could sway them. Consider Gandhi, who faced unimaginable hostility, violence, and ridicule, yet he did not allow anger to dictate his path. Why? Because his vision was not personal victory, but the liberation of an entire people. The insults hurled at him were but whispers compared to the roar of the freedom he envisioned. His calm was not passivity, but the strength of a man who knew what he served. Or think of Martin Luther King Jr., who marched into the jaws of hatred with serenity because his vision was not revenge but justice. Their calm was not a tactic. It was the natural outflow of clarity. When you know the higher purpose you serve, you cannot be easily provoked. The truth is, every confrontation offers you a choice. Will you be enslaved by the immediate, or will you be guided by the ultimate? The ego thrives on immediacy. It craves the satisfaction of winning now, of proving itself in the moment. But the soul thrives on the eternal. It whispers of visions that stretch beyond a single argument, beyond the sting of a single word, beyond the flare of a single insult. To anchor yourself in the larger vision is to align yourself with that eternal, to live not as a prisoner of the moment, but as an architect of something greater. This is not always easy. In the midst of anger, the larger vision can feel distant, like a lighthouse barely visible through fog. But it is precisely in those moments that you must choose to recall it. Ask yourself, what am I truly fighting for? What is it that I wish to preserve? What story do I want this moment to tell when I look back on it from the distance of years? These questions have the power to cut through the haze of emotion and restore your clarity. You see, calmness in confrontation is not the absence of feeling, it is the presence of alignment. When your actions are tethered to something higher than the urge of the moment, you become unshakable. Your words carry weight not because they are loud, but because they are rooted in purpose. Your silence, too, becomes meaningful because it is chosen in service of the vision you hold. And when others witness this, they are drawn into your steadiness. Your calm becomes a kind of leadership, guiding not just yourself, but those around you out of the storm. This is the deeper invitation to live as one who remembers. To remember in every conflict that there is something greater than pride, greater than ego, greater than the fleeting satisfaction of winning an argument. Whether that greater thing is the success of a shared mission, the sanctity of love, or the sovereignty of your own inner peace, let it be your anchor. For when the storms of confrontation rise, It is not the waves that determine your course, but the anchor that holds you steady. And so, to stay calm in any confrontation is not simply to master techniques of pause, or to separate ego from essence, or even to listen deeply. It is to hold in your heart the vision of who you are becoming and what you are serving. Then, every argument, every clash, every storm ceases to be a threat, and instead becomes a test of your devotion to the greater horizon that calls you forward. For when the small battles lose their power, you step into the timeless truth. Peace is not the absence of conflict, but the alignment with purpose that no conflict can undo. To stay calm in confrontation is to master yourself in the arena where most falter. It is not the absence of fire, but the art of walking through it without being burned. Pause before reacting. Separate ego from essence. Listen with depth. Respond with intention. Anchor in the larger vision. Do this, and you will not only face confrontation, you will transform it. Your calm will become contagious, your strength undeniable, and your presence unforgettable. For the world does not need more fighters of petty battles. It needs more guardians of peace, who carry storms in silence and strength in stillness.